All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to How to Make a Board Game. I'll be the host of this panel this evening. I'm Matthew Hawker. Quick little background on me. I am a self-publisher. I've kickstarted 2 games now, and I help run a playtesting group called Break My Game. Making games is fun and challenging, and I'm excited and hopeful that we can provide some cool information for you all, especially those who are interested in starting this journey on your own. I'd love to hear a little bit more about our other panelists, so we can move down the line and tell us a little bit about yourself and your history in board gaming.
Sure. Hi. So my name is Jonathan Texera-Moffett. I'm the board game developer with the longest damn name in the world. So I came into it like a lot of you probably You can't hear me? Whoa, there we go.
Uh-oh.
No? Can you hear me now? Okay, closer. Sorry, I've been pitching all day and I've lost my voice entirely. So I own a company called Stone Circle Games. We're local, about 2 miles to the south here. So I like to say I got into publishing out of spite because I couldn't get my games published by anybody else. So I said I'll do it myself, and I made my own company. So we've been in operation for 10, 11 years now, put out a number of games, mostly crowdfunding, but some kind of self-publishing, self-fulfilling type stuff. That's me.
My name is Joseph. I also am a self-publisher in this local area, 20 minutes away, under the name Ludimus Games. And I just actually had my first game successfully funded on Kickstarter. So, yeah. I also help Matthew run Break My Game, do local events for playtesters and designers. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'd like to kick this off by probably the most important question of making a game, which is really just how to get started. So starting a game itself is challenging. There's all sorts of new and exciting ideas you're looking to explore and kind of put together. So tell us a little bit about how you kind of start that process. What are some of the things you look to when you're getting started, and how do you start putting those ideas together into like a playable state or kind of make things moving?
Yeah, sure. So usually you have some sort of idea. Obviously, you probably all have lots of those. Sometimes it's a thematic type thing. I want a game about spaceship pirates, right? Sometimes it's a cool little mechanism. A lot of times you've played a game and you say, that's cool. I like this piece. What can I do with that? So a lot of times that's kind of where you start. Usually, at least for me, and everyone else can kind of chime in, I have something like that I'm sort of building on, whether it's a theme. For me, it's usually more a feel, what experience I want my players to have. Do I want you to trust each other? Do I want you to distrust each other? Usually with me, it's that one. I want you to hate each other and get a little angry. I like a little bit of confrontation, a little bit of fun rivalry. So usually there's a theme or a mechanic or experience, and I kind of build around that. And if I have one, I look at the others. I say, well, I want my players to be paranoid. How do I do that? Is that because there's things they don't know? Is that, what theme would fit that? I kind of build those other pieces onto it. And then the most important part, but it'll kind of lead into probably our next topic, is as soon as you have enough together, you can start writing down anything at all. Usually, I'm starting thinking about making a prototype. It's going to be really ugly. It's going to be a piece of paper with my handwriting on it. It's going to be pieces I stole from other games. I can give you a list of games that are very cheap and have good parts. That's something that developers usually know. So that's the second step, is usually I get a set of rules or some ideas that I know will not work, but I put together something to put out in the real world to start moving things around the table. And a lot of times it's not really a game yet, it's not a play test, it's not fun, it's just seeing things out there, that spatial, whether it's the relationship between things that I didn't think about. Oh, well, that piece of it, that doesn't make any sense. I need a board now. I thought it could be cards. So at least for me, the physical nature, as soon as I have some ideas, I start building something. It's going to be, like I said, it's going to be garbage. It's going to be not really a game, but you start moving it around and you see your ideas in the real world, and you can start building the actual game from that. Probably getting too far ahead of myself, so we'll see what your thoughts are.
I'm not too far off from that. I tend to design based off feel and theme as well, and also I'll add on, I tend to like pretty things. So table presence is always something that I gravitate towards for most of the games that I collect. So that's something that is important to me as well. Like, I want my games to look pretty. I want them to have a visual element that kind of centerpieces things. Things that are tactile, things that are just fun to play with. That's that feeling that I really like to play with in games. And I also tend to design when I'm thinking about like, well, what would my friend group like to play? Like, what do we like to play? What's missing from what we play? And how can I create that and have a good time with just my friends? And then, yeah, exactly. Like, I take those ideas and then I start playing with it in, a spreadsheet, or a sketchbook. I'm a visual person, so spreadsheet only gets me so far. Eventually, I need to just sketch it out. And so drawing, horrible horrible illustrations of things, stick figures or whatever it is, I need to get it down on paper or on my computer, just so I can visualize it and see what it looks like and see if it's horrible or if it's actually has legs potentially. And then, yes, straight into either a virtual prototype or a physical. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. I'll bounce off of this as well. The best way to get started is to just throw some stuff together, throw some spaghetti at the wall, right? All of your ideas are amazing, but until they leave your head, they are just ideas. So the best way to start making something and actualizing that game you want to make into a reality is to make it into a reality. It's going to be utter nonsense. It doesn't have to make sense. The best piece of advice I have when you start something is to never let perfect be the enemy of the good. The sooner you get something together, the sooner you can start working on things. And I promise you, you're going to make a billion changes on this journey. And that is the best part of this journey. So whatever idea you have in your head, it's probably going to morph a little bit, and that's absolutely okay. Don't be afraid of starting that journey. Don't be afraid of putting stuff together. Show it to people early on. Put it all down, write it down, look at it, write it down again, see if it stays the same, see if anything changes, but start getting stuff together quickly. And make it quick, make it as fast as possible. Just throw it in however you want to do it. Put some physical stuff together, start rolling some dice around, see what feels good. But start getting that thing and actualizing it as fast as possible, because the longer it's in your head, the greater the difficulty is going to be in actually getting it there, because you're going to start feeling, I feel anxious when I start making an idea and kind of throwing stuff together, because then I make it into this big thing that it isn't yet.
It's with your head, it's perfect.
Yeah, in the head it's perfect.
It's perfect, and then you put it down the thing and it's terrible, and that's scary.
Yeah, don't be discouraged with how ugly it looks at first.
Yes, it should, in fact. It should look like that, because you don't want people to go, oh, this looks so good, this looks amazing, you should publish this, because chances are you're going to want to play test it, which probably brings us into the next piece of insight here. Play testing games. So you've had this idea, you've made a thing. So what next? How do you evolve that thing? How do we get that from that initial point to the later stages? So can we talk a little about playtesting? Tell us a little bit about how you build a game through playtesting and the value of playtesting.
Absolutely, absolutely. So kind of what you said, the initial idea, it's perfect in your head, it's great, but it's ultimately probably going to be useless all by itself, right? It's going to come out, it's going to be something, and it's going to change over time, and you have to let it change. You have to be very open to it evolving. You have to be very open to the feedback from people. I'll get back to feedback in a second, but as far as how I do the playtesting, like I said, usually my first playtests are just me. It's a bunch of pieces, it's not really a game, it's not fun, it's just I'm thinking things through. It's really more an extension of my brainstorming. As it gets more to a game, maybe I'll branch out to playing two hands, or I'll play 2 or 3 players. I'm not worried about strategy. I'm just worried about, is this something where it immediately falls apart when you push this button? When I move this cube here, does that immediately win the game? And that's not fun. Is it doing what I want it to do? Think about playing games with your friend group as a core. If you're not enjoying that game, that proto game, you're going to lose interest, you're going to get burned out, and you're not going to be happy. Playtesting is a lot of work. It takes a lot of time. You're going to get a lot of criticism, sometimes good, sometimes bad. But if you're not enjoying that game, then it's not going to be worth it in the end, right? If it's not at the end something you want to play, why are you doing this, right? We're making a game to sell it and not enjoy it. You have to enjoy the process, or sell it or not, publish it or not, you're going to be miserable the entire time. When it's game enough that I won't feel bad, I have a close circle of friends who are very, very open. They like beer. I give them beer. They come and play my games. So it's very good to have that friend group. There are a lot of online options now, especially things like TTS, Tabletopia, things like that. I think we'll talk more about that later because I'm kind of new at that. The pandemic forced me. I didn't want to, but I play games digitally now. That's a good way to find people very, very quickly and very far away. But that core group, what you're looking for, sometimes I call it the with a pulse test, where I have a game and I want people to play it. I don't care what happens. I don't care if you like it. I don't care if it's good. I just want humans to move pieces and see what I can learn from that. And I'm fortunate to have friends who are trusting and will go through the motions. Again, I give them beer. But what I'm looking for there is, do things move the way I want? And is it a game at all? Then I worry about making it fun. And that's when I go back, iterate, keep making changes, and hopefully bring it to other people. Other designers in particular are very useful here. Things like Break My Game, Unpub, big events, starting to go from trusted friends to less trusted friends to eventually strangers. And that's where you get the most criticism and some of the best feedback as well is from strangers, because they don't care about you. They don't care if this publishes. They just care, did I have fun? Did I like this? Did I get what it's going? Yeah. In terms of feedback, always be open to it. The most, I think, important lesson I've learned about feedback and the way I've tried to approach my response, all feedback is legitimate. They're telling you the way they feel. Strangers are not going to lie to you. They might say, oh, yeah, it's great. Take that with what it is. But if they say, I don't like this, or I loved this piece, or, well, that felt overpowered, or this part is stupid, maybe that was the core of your game. Their feedback is legitimate. They have feelings. That was what they felt, and that's how they internalize things. Sometimes they're right and you need to change it. Sometimes they're wrong. Sometimes they're wrong but for the right reason. You get a piece of feedback and you say, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why did you hate that? Don't delegitimize their feelings and their feedback, but don't literally take what they did as what you have to do. Playtesters are great at finding problems, great at feedback. They're bad at solutions. They'll say, I hated this, this, and this. Maybe the solution is to take those things out. Maybe the solution is to change those things or take one out and combine the other two. They're not going to solve your problems for you. They're going to give the feedback. You have to practice turning their feelings, their, again, legitimate, their actual feelings, what their experiences are, and turn that into something else. You felt that's overpowered. Why did you feel that way? Okay, actually, the numbers are all fine. The problem was, this thing isn't working the way I want it to. So that thing you thought was overpowered is actually perfect. This other thing is broken. I can fix that, okay? And so the real most important thing is be open to iteration, be open to feedback, but don't feel that everything everyone says has to be immediately actionable. That's not how it works. You're the designer, it's your vision. If they push you in a direction you didn't like, be open to that. Be open to being uncomfortable. It hurts to get feedback like that, but know that it's usually coming from an honest place and take it for what it is.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll add to that. Taking critique and criticism is a skill, I think. I mean, you have to work at it, you have to be patient, and you have to try to put feelings aside and just try to see their perspective, try to see what they're looking for, trying to see what they saw and understand. If you start trying to not necessarily argue, but basically, what's the word I'm trying to think of?
Defensive, don't be defensive.
Yes,
Right.
don't be defensive.
Yeah. Never
sure.
argue with the playtester.
Yeah, try not to be defensive about what they're saying. Well, the reason you feel that way is because I haven't done this. You don't need to explain yourself. You shouldn't have to. Just keep that locked in and hear them for what they're saying, and thank them for taking the time to play test your game. I agree. Yes, you don't want to just play with your mom. You want to spread out and try to get some people who don't care about your feelings. And
How dare you? My mom is a saint.
yeah, my mom doesn't understand my game anyway. So I wanted to touch on so when you first initially start playtesting, I try to get the core loop working, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you're just trying to get that core loop in a state where it works, and then you build out from there. Let's see, what else? Sorry, going back to the criticism, take things with a grain of salt, obviously. like you said, like you shouldn't just think of everybody's criticism the same. There are reasons for certain, why people might feel a certain way about those things. And so understanding that and understanding what you think you want for your game are still important, and you should still make the game that you want to make. So, one other thing that I just wrote down, don't try to change too much at once. I've done that. It's not fun. You may want to change a bunch of stuff, especially when you get great feedback. But doing that makes it really hard later on to understand why your next playtest didn't go so well. It can make it hard. Sometimes some things might be obvious, but other things, it's going to be really difficult. So if you make very small iterations, that's where you can kind of start figuring out where the issues are. I think that's about it. I think you hit a lot of stuff. Okay. Well, I mean, I can touch a little bit more on virtual playtesting. Yes, the pandemic forced me into virtual playtesting as well. And yeah, that was a game changer for the better. I mean, it was something I always wanted to try doing, but I didn't think that anyone would actually want to play test my game online. That's when I found Break My Game as well. And we have a huge online community of people on Break My Game global. We're actually the largest playtesting group on Discord, which is really awesome. So we do weekly events, and it's a fantastic way to do fast, iterative playtesting, especially for early playtesting. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know what that is. Anyways, that's what I like to use virtual playtesting for, early prototypes.
Yeah, early prototyping.
Because you can instantly change out a file if you need to. It takes a lot more effort to retype something, cut it out, print it out, cut it out, sleeve it or whatever, and then wait for your friend group to show up for the next outing. When you have, you just go to the next virtual playtesting.
So, Joey, what does it mean to virtual playtest? Can you define that a little bit further for everyone?
So there are several helpful programs out there that you can use to basically, it's an engine, a space where you can put your game together and have people play it on a virtual space, tablet, computer. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
You want to add on to that? Because that was probably horrible.
Yeah, no, you did fantastic info. So I'll talk about playtesting. And so you can tell we all have a lot to say about playtesting, because this is probably the most important part of game development, is the slow and long process of iterating something over and 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 over again. It never stops. And even when you think you're done, you're still going to be doing playtesting. There's always going to be something to test. One thing I'll say off the bat, despite everything I just said there, you have to know where to draw a line. You can playtest infinitely. You can iterate your game forever. Knowing when to stop is important. But that probably comes a little bit later in development. One of the things that I think is really important that I don't think has been mentioned yet is solo playtesting. So you have this idea, you've thrown some pieces together, run through it on your own. Like for a little bit, imagine what someone else would do in a situation. Just play through a little bit and try to think about what other players would do. Solo playtesting is a great way just to see if things seem okay, right? So you've just put all the glue together. It's a good way to see if it's actually sticking. And that gives you an opportunity to iterate it before you throw it in front of others. That said, I do like to get games in front of other people as quickly as possible. You don't have to do a full playtest of your game. You don't have to go through the game from point A all the way to the end. Maybe you play it for 5 minutes, you see something and that is exactly what you need, you can stop the playtest. That is absolutely okay. Never feel like you have to go through the game and all the way from start to finish. Because the reality is, especially early on in development, you're going to be making a lot of changes. Start just seeing how things are working, and if the core loop's going well, like Joey mentioned, core loop is important, keep going through, but never feel like you have to go through the full game, because the reality is there's so much information that you're going to be drawing from, you're probably not going to catch all of it and be able to edit every part of the game and then bring that into the next play test. That said, I do want to push back on one thing Joey mentioned. Sometimes you've done enough play testing and the idea is just not working. and you just want to throw the whole thing away and start over, you can do that. You don't like if you're running into a wall over and over again, it is okay to walk away from that game development and go down a different direction.
And maybe you'll come back to it later, and you maybe you'll do some other game and find a solution later.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I want to mention that I think is really important that I've had to learn over the years is that you are the moderator of your playtest session. You're the leader of that space, and there are pros and cons to that. When you're showing your game to people for the first time, you may be inclined to ask questions like, did you like it? Is it fun? Did you, or, like you're looking for that affirmation, and those are okay questions sometimes, but sometimes other people are like, yeah, I loved it, and they may not be honest with you. You want to be careful about not leading someone down a path where they're not giving you honest information. Some things that I recommend to sort of combat that and our own personal ego and trying to protect that is asking questions like, what are some things you liked in this game? What are some things you didn't like in the game? What was what was your favorite moment in the game? Or if you could change one thing about the game, what would it be? Kind of pinpointing on those things, because no one is saying to you, I love the game or I didn't love the game. They're just really trying to focus on those moments, and you can really sort of dissect those a little bit.
Things like, did you feel like you had enough choices?
Yeah, did you feel like you have enough choices?
Right.
Things like that are a great way to have that conversation about liking or not liking things without using those words.
How much time do you think has passed?
Yes. How long did you feel you were playing the game for? If you made a 45-minute game and they felt like it took 4 hours, write that down. That is something you want to think about. Asking great questions is a great part of having a great play test. With that, watching body language. So if you, and this works both physically and virtually, and I'll tell you how that works in a second. But if you're at a play test and someone's looking like this, and they're falling asleep, probably something wrong, right? So it might be the case that they're not feeling like they're interacting or engaging with the game, and you want to make a note of that. If you're doing virtual play testing and you have your game up on a platform like, some examples are Tabletop Playground, Tabletopia is a browser-based platform, ScreenTop.gg is a browser-based platform, and you see that little mouse cursor going all over the place, not engaging with the game, they might be bored, which means you want to make a note of that. Like, when did they start doing that? When do they seem like they're not paying attention? Because those are the moments of your game you might want to see, can I make this faster? Can I make this more engaging? Can I make this more interactive for the players? Virtual and physical playtesting are both great opportunities to do this. Virtual playtesting, like they mentioned, is a great gateway to iterate quickly because I don't have to print and cut and glue and do all those things in the physical space over and over and over again. So as we mentioned, if you're making a lot of changes in your game early, which you probably should be, virtual playtesting is a great opportunity to do that. So when you're going through that playtesting route at this point, you've now started moving into this, let's say we've been playtesting for a while. We're starting to go into the stages where we're thinking about self-publishing or pitching a game to publishers. What are some of the key things we want to start thinking about as we move into those next steps?
Whew, that's tough. So when I have done some mentoring, I think you've done some mentoring too, what has helped me the most and what with my journey, what I think has helped people the most is making sure you are very clear what your success looks like, okay? Success does not have to be Catan, making millions of dollars. That's not the only version of success. It's really thinking hard about what do I want out of this? Do I want to make something one of a kind, beautiful for my shelf that my friends and I can play and it's just what we wanted? Awesome. That's a route. Do you want to try to make a lot of money? Do you want to try to make something it just exists virtually and lots of people can play and maybe we'll make a lot of money on it, but it can get out there a lot? Do you want to try to make something that is published and again on shelves in stores and things like that? Do you have a particular company or style you really like that you want to kind of fit into? There are some very, very small genres within genres, 18XX, for example, or the Chit and Hex war games. They have very special communities that have very different visions of what success looks like. Those super high density 18XX games, they're never going to be super beautiful things with miniatures and stuff. That's not what they want. They want to look the way they want to look. They want to publish 100 copies of it and have 100 people enjoy it a lot. That's what they want. Some people want games that are smaller and you can bring to a convention and sell and see the public will like, and you want to do that. I think the first step to that route is deciding what does success look like for me. If you start and you think, I'm going to sell 1 million of these, I'm going to be rich, it's going to be awesome, everyone's going to love it, everyone's going to think I'm the greatest person ever. I won't say that's impossible, but please don't do that. And seriously, from the practical standpoint, but also just for your own mental well-being, right? If that's all that will make you happy, that is incredibly hard and very, very unlikely. I've been doing this for many, many years, and I am not famous. I'm not rich. I lose money quite often, right? That's just not how it works. So you really need to know what it is you want to get out of it. I think that's the first step, and that'll inform what you're going to do next. Playtesting, we've gotten things together. The usual kind of options, I'll kind of lay out, and then I'll let them expand upon it, are generally self-publishing, making it yourself, and again, just making the copies you want for yourself and your friends, or self-publishing and selling it, or selling it to a publisher, pitching to a publisher is the other most common one. And so you kind of take over where the next steps on that.
Sure. Yeah. That's a great lead into those two different options are very different. On one, you are just mainly, doing the thing that you might want to do, which is just the game, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. That's awesome. But you may be giving some control of that up if you go the self-publishing route, which again, that's fine if you're okay with that. Then there's the self-publishing, which is a whole another beast, and that we could go back and forth on talking about that. But did you mainly want to talk about pitching or just the branch of...
Can I go down with the branches and see?
Understanding the branch and what that means.
Understanding the branch, got it. Yeah, so...
We'll just talk about the branch and then we can go.
Right, okay. Yeah, so that's the branch, and it's... If you want full control, the self-publishing route is the route for you, but there's lots involved with that. Lots of money, lots of skills that you either need or you need to, reach out to other people to do for you, which involves money. And yeah, it's a lot of time that goes into all of that. So just be aware of that when you go into that. If that is your end goal of self-publishing, making a self-publishing company and having multiple games, it's a lot.
There are some paths that, let's talk about that sort of branch for a little bit. So you've play tested your game, you have a concept. There are a couple things that I think are relevant to both those paths that you should think about. Before you even start thinking about those paths, what is the hook of your game? If you had 10 seconds to talk to someone about your game, what are you going to tell them? What is that staying power? Because whether you're pitching to a publisher, you're making a game for yourself, or you're making a game for family and friends, or you're making a game to sell, understanding how to summarize the core of that experience or what you're looking to give others is really important for understanding your game. You've been working on this for a while now. Now it's time to kind of really contextualize that experience and give it to someone else, whether you're selling it or, again, giving it to a publisher. Regarding the branches and trying to make a decision there, making your own game and self-publishing it is really, really, really hard. It's really difficult. And I try to be honest and upfront about that. And it's not even just an aspect of the financial investment, there's a time investment to this as well. When you're pitching to a publisher, one of the best parts of pitching to a publisher is the fact that once you have the mechanics, once you've understood that hook and you've maybe created something like a sell sheet, and we can talk about those more in a little bit, it's someone else's problem. You did all the work in making the game, and now they got to figure out how to sell it to people. You don't have to do any of that. When you're self-publishing, you have to figure out how to sell it to people and how to get people engaged in your content. And that means how you go from the beginning of the journey to the end of the journey can change a little bit, because you're going to be thinking about different things like, how do I get somebody to buy this? Like, what about this is something that somebody would want? And those are things that you kind of think about when you're pitching to publishers, but you're definitely thinking about when you're making it on your own. The other thing that I would bring up here that I think is also important is you're going to keep playtesting. You should keep playtesting all the time, always. You probably shouldn't stop playtesting at this point in the stage. Even if you feel like the game is in a good place, as you start thinking about these paths, playtesting is going to help you understand where you want to bring your game to that next level. Now, I guess we can talk about both of those real quick, and then we can take some questions following that.
Sure, yeah.
Let's talk about self-publishing a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit about that journey, what that entails generally, and kind of what you can do with that?
So we got our prototype. It's great, right? It's wonderful. You made it yourself. Self-publishing could be in two forms. Could be just making them and then giving them out. My friends want to have them, that kind of stuff. Or again, as Matt said, forming a company and actually selling the damn things. Regardless, you're going to make nicer and nicer versions. There are companies that will handle small run printing for you. Things like Game Crafter, Print My Game, Drive-Through Cards. I know there's more.
Make playing cards.
Make
I think
playing
is another
cards.
one. Yeah.
And so you're going to want to have at least some artwork and some formatting and stuff. These may be skills you have. They may be skills you have to buy, get from somebody else. But ultimately what you can do is you can get a very professional, if expensive per unit, game in front of you. They'll do dice, chits, all that kind of stuff. Great, you make it beautiful. And this is kind of what you use as your promotional piece. If you're thinking bigger, especially selling it, if you're thinking of publishing it largely, this would be your selling piece. If you're happy with just your friends having it, your journey is kind of done there. You've made your 10 copies. They're expensive, but we've got our 10 copies. We're happy. And again, this is why I talked about those pass and on routes. But if you're self-publishing, that's just kind of the start. Self-publishing is really just running a business. And if you run businesses, it doesn't matter what the business is. You have to deal with credit card transactions and bank stuff. You have to deal with paying employees. God, taxes. Thank God someone else does that for me. You have to have social media presence. Right? You have to deal with emails and responses and things like that. If you make the game and ship it, you have to deal with shipping fulfillment partners. You have to deal with manufacturers in China. If things get to your customer and there's something broken, someone has to respond and fix that. If you want to sell them in conventions, you have to go to a convention and sell it. You have to coordinate with event coordinators. That's not an exhaustive list, but that's just to say self-publishing is less about the design and more about the business itself. Any of those things, as you said, can be given to somebody else, but it costs money, right? And so the question and the balance there is how much of a business person do you want to be? How much of the business side do you want? Do you like social media? Do you like promotion? Do you like going to events like this and talking like this? Do you like negotiating with people in China, half in English, half in Chinese, and figuring out different dimensions and prices? Some people do, some people don't. It depends on your skill set. So that's a big part of it. And then again, pitching side, that's why we said that third branch, you're just kind of giving all that to them. So that's just to be aware, that's what the publisher is doing. That's what we're doing. And so that's what that route entails. It really gets more into the business and the manufacturing than the design part. And so again, thinking back, what makes you happy? What do you really want out of this? Consider and know what you're in for when you're in each of these paths.
Yeah. I mean, you hit everything on the on the head there.
I'm chatty.
No, that's. I wanted to. I guess I could go back and focus a little bit on like gathering followers and marketing and things like that. So I have a little bit of a marketing background, and I do graphic design. So that helps. That definitely helps a lot with starting. So if you already have a skill that you can use towards self-publishing, I mean, that is already sending you above where you would be if you didn't and you had to ask somebody or have somebody do that for you. But one thing that's important is gathering followers. And how do you do that? You don't just do it out of thin air. You do these conventions. If you can find places to just set up, and like the MITS Hall right here, which is where all three of us is. They are awesome for getting independent developers to just set up their game and play it, and you gain followers in that way. And hopefully you're also doing an email list when after people have played it, or giving them your social media information, send them to Discord, web page. One of those is a great way to get their information so that you can keep them up to date and they can stay up to date with all the stuff you're doing, which is great. Social media is huge. So if you don't like social media, sorry. Tough luck. You're gonna have to get social media. All of them are Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, even. I mean, I've been dabbling in TikTok, and there's a big board game scene on TikTok. So Instagram. So all of the board game community is huge, and we're just spread out everywhere, which means that you have to be everywhere if you want to reach out to those folks. Having a web page is really important. I know some folks think that it's not, and you just have your Kickstarter page and be happy, or social media page. But I really think, personally, a web page is important to have a persona, your company, to make it feel a little professional. But also just have links to all the stuff you're going to, and you have a little bit more control over all that stuff than if it was all, on Facebook, on a Facebook page or something like that.
Yeah. I would say that honestly, whether you're self-publishing, you're pitching to publishers, or whatever your direction you're going, networking is probably a big part of this. The reality is, whether it's knowing other designers, going to these kind of community events or conventions, interacting with other people, the more people you know, the more people you're in contact with, the more people are exposed to you and see you, the more likely people are going to be able to recognize you. And that's whether you're pitching to a publisher who's like, oh, I've seen that designer before, I've seen that game previously, or whether you're self-publishing and people are like, oh, I saw that game in a convention hall, I saw someone playing that, I want to check it out. The reality is, the more places you are, like Joey mentioned, the more likely you are to probably find success or have people recognize you. Same thing with social media. It's all the same kind of stuff. Whatever direction you're going, you really want to have that kind of presence somewhere. If you are, let me talk about the pitching to publisher side a little bit, because I think we really tackled self-publishing here. When you're pitching to publishers, things like a sell sheet are very important. Quick synopsis information on what your game is or what it's all about is very important. A sell sheet, maybe like a 1 to 2 minute video, have something like that prepared. And this kind of also goes into the fact that making a board game and getting it out in the world is more than just making a board game. Having some basic graphic design knowledge is very helpful. You don't have to be a master at it, but watch a couple YouTube videos, download a free program on the internet. I think GIMP is a really great program. Canva is useful. I personally am a big fan of the Affinity Suite, which is like a sort of a Photoshop offshoot, but it has things like Affinity Publisher, which you can use very well to make cards, using something called data merge, which I could talk a lot about, but just write that down if you're interested in data merge and look that up, because that's super important for virtual playtesting.
Everybody uses Nandeck now.
Or Nandeck is also good for data merge. But a lot of programs do that, super helpful. And then if you are a professional designer or illustrator, you probably have access to Adobe products, which are also super helpful. But in general, it's so important to have that quick information, whether you are publishing yourself or whether you're pitching to other publishers, because it's got to be somewhere. You got to have that out there. People want to see it. They want to understand who you are. And unfortunately, I hate to say it, like if somebody knows who you are when you're pitching to a publisher, they're probably more likely to look at the game because they recognize you from somewhere else. So the more involved you are in the community, the more likely you are to kind of get that content out there. Now, we have about 20 minutes left, roughly. I was kind of open the floor up to questions for folks that have it.
Wow, okay, sure.
And then, awesome, yeah.
Yeah.
On the topic of publishers, there's so many out there. How would you go about choosing which publisher is the right one for you?
This is a great question. The first thing I would say, just going back to networking, is as you get to know other designers as well, ask if you see designers that are part of publishing companies. Doesn't hurt to ask them questions, to reach out to them. I've absolutely reached out to people in the communities of game design to see what their experience has been. And I found great success with that. But I would also say that the reality is publishers are all looking for different things, and it's really hard to place that. And the reality is sometimes publishers just go off by vibes, which sounds ridiculous, but it really is the case. I mean, we're all humans, and when publishers go into things, they're looking for two things. Can I market this to my target audience? Can I sell it to my target audience? And do I think this designer is going to be a good fit with my brand, right? Which is where that media presence is probably going to be somewhat relevant. When you're thinking about publishers, think about and look toward publishers that are designing games similar to what you're making. If you're making a lightweight game, you probably don't want to pitch to the folks that are making Warhammer, right? And so start thinking and start kind of bucketing those, like make a list of different publishers that make games that are similar to yours. I'm also a big fan of keeping an eye out for design contests and opportunities, because those can be a really great way to at least get something to a publisher and get feedback on that. So similar to for networking, join design communities, post it out there like, hey, I've seen this publisher, I want to know a little bit more information. There is a large network of designers who will give you very honest information about their experience of publishers. Does anyone have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'd say the important thing is pitch often, pitch a lot. You've got 2 things in progress, great. Pitch both of those to 10 different publishers, 11, just keep going. Sometimes you'll have things like non-disclosures or non-compete. Some publishers have that, very few really do. Get to know as many as you can, get to know, like Matt said, what they're looking for. But just as important, be the kind of designer that they'd like to work with. There's plenty of people who are great designers, but they're just terrible to work with. And unless you know as a publisher that you're going to make me $1 million, I don't want to touch this because you're going to be a pain in the butt, right? I don't need more pains in my life. I've got 3 kids. So be someone that wants to work with. Networking is a huge part of it. And then just looking at their back catalog. What kinds of things do they publish? War game companies are mostly going to stick with war games. That's a subgenre within a genre. That being said, don't be afraid to try something that's maybe close. Publish a lot, pitch a lot. Like you said, it's by vibes. We have tried in my company many times to define what it is we publish. And at the end of the day, it's we like this game. I don't know how to tell you that. I know we don't publish heavy word games that take 10 hours. I know that, but that's about all I know. So you'll see a lot of publishers will put out, we're looking for this, this, and this. If it's a specific call out, don't waste their time with something that's completely outside. Usually they'll be clear, we don't do party games. We do not do war games. We do not do serious historical fiction. Great. Usually they're serious about things like that and they're pretty hardline about it. But if they say, hey, we're looking for something in the 30 to 40 minute range, we want usually 4 to 5 players. If yours goes 6 players or maybe 3, but it's close otherwise, sure, it doesn't hurt. There are publisher speed dating type things. A lot of times events like Unpub or many conventions will have speed dating. That's a really great opportunity, again, to get just some feedback. They've only got 2 minutes. Really good practice on your pitch, right? Really good practice on being able to hook them. The cold reality is that publishers are people like us. They're nice usually, but they do need to take your idea and make money off of it, more money than they spent. And so when you're pitching, it's not just this is fun. Millions of fun games come out every year. Millions of fun games are not published every year.
Is it practical?
Is it practical? Is it doable? Is it cost effective? Yeah, and is it different? Why would I publish this instead of these 3? What is different about it? If you say, yeah, it's got unicorns, everyone loves unicorns. Cool, there's unicorn games. Why don't I publish the other unicorn game? Why don't I publish the Liger game? People like Ligers too. You have to catch them on something that is unique about your game, something that's interesting and that says, oh yeah, this is different from those other ideas. I want to make that. Get them excited.
I have one more thing to add there. So Cardboard Edison is a great one, and I believe they are actually doing a competition. They're taking submissions until this month, right? Until the end of this month. And that is a great way to get noticed. And even if you don't make it very far in it, you're still getting noticed. And a lot of the publishers out there are judging these games. They're actually playing these games and looking at them behind the scenes, which sometimes is the best way to do it because you're not influencing them. You're not, engaging with them and just, disturbing the process. But yeah, that's another option as well.
Cardboard Edison's great to follow, and one other thing to add is follow publishers on social media. They will sometimes put out calls to designers, so I would say follow as many as you can so you can keep track of that, because it's really easy to miss, especially when they're going to conventions. They will sometimes take pitches at physical events like this. Let's take some more questions.
Edison or Edison?
Cardboard Edison.
Edison, like the guy.
Yeah. Yep.
Question. You're thinking about the manufacturing part of it? Right. Yeah, you're right. There are very few companies really in the big scheme of things, and they're almost all in China or in Europe. There are some in the US. I think Panda has a facility there, but it's only for doing some components. It's not everything. And it's, from what I understand, pretty backed up for the next 10 years. That's really getting into the publishing side when you're looking at your cost effectiveness. And again, that's why publishers care so much. Like, this is the greatest game in the world. This is great. It's going to cost $100 to make. I can't sell it for $100. So that's something that you will have to deal with as a publisher. I don't know what the pitfalls I'd say, bottlenecks. There's always ways you can make things cheaper. Going to smaller chits, making the box smaller, going say, well, I've got a deck of cards instead of these tokens. What if the tokens were cards? The fewer kinds of components and the simpler components, always cheaper. It's just a balance for what you think the customers will pay, what is helpful, what makes it better versus what's just nice to have, and then what the cost and weight are. It rapidly gets very, very complicated with shipping, manufacturing, tooling, all that kind of stuff. We could talk all day about just boards and options there, but it's really that cost analysis. You have to, as a small publisher publishing yourself, you have to be willing to give up some things and simplify and streamline, but that's the balance.
Yeah. I don't want you to take away from that like asking for things like a box insert is insane or anything like that. There are quite a few companies that can do that, and mostly in China, who can do that just fine, and that are not bottlenecked as far as I know. Several of the companies that I got quotes from my game did not have any issues with getting it in line with getting ready to
being backed up. Okay. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. No, you're fine. But yeah, no, I just don't want you to think that's impossible to get your game manufactured in the next year or something like that. But there are companies out there that can do that stuff, but not everything is possible. Like there's definitely limits to what you can do. And just looking at some of the other games that are out there are a good indicator of what is possible and what isn't. So.
Yeah, I would say a good way to avoid bottlenecks and like a manufacturing side, if and when those do exist, is very much what you just mentioned. Sometimes you have to take the materials in a different direction. Oftentimes in game design, a lot of people will have a discussion, what comes first, theme or mechanics? Sometimes there's a reality that components come first. If you have very complex components, that's tough to pitch. It's also tough to make, and so that's something to really keep in mind. It's why a lot of games use cards, because cards are usually fairly easy to produce. If you're looking for smaller companies in the United States without having to do like a major print run as a self-publisher, GameCrafter is an option. If you're looking to do very, very small things, sort of like what we mentioned earlier, you can do print and play games. You can print a couple things off of that, makeplayingcards.com. But a lot of those websites, when you're using those websites, as a self-publisher, you're probably not going to make much profit off of those. Some do find success, like on the GameCrafter, but I know they recently increased their prices for components, so again, it's tricky. So my answer there is like either A, you have to figure out a way, like if you're concerned about those bottlenecks and you're concerned about those things, you either have to find A, get enough people where you can produce it in China where you can actually make it, or B, you're gonna have to change some components to make it work with a smaller manufacturer. Other questions? Oh, I think you had your hand raised earlier, so I'd love to get you.
So my question was, like, let's say you guys are in a playtest, and there was something that immediately spoke out to you, like, that's broken, I do not like that. Like, what is your guys' process when it's like, I need to change these things in the game?
So I'll tackle that first. So just a couple things that are important before even thinking about that. It's really important, like what I mentioned earlier, that you're the moderator of your playtesting experience, which means that it's important to set expectations. If you're early on in game design, it's very okay to say at the beginning of the playtest, hey everybody, thank you so much for being here. So you know, this is brand new. It might break in a second. I don't know, I might be making changes here. And when you say that, everyone is incredibly understanding. You may occasionally run into some frustrations if you don't say that. So I think it's important to set standards and expectations properly, and to let folks know, hey, like if something doesn't seem like it's playing right, if something seems broken, let me know. You can have those conversations with your playtesters, and you can have those opportunities to make corrections in the game when you set that up. But don't be afraid to make corrections or change things in the middle of the playtest on the fly. I just think it's important to set expectations.
Yeah, can I add on to that? So it's also nice to let folks know what you're looking for sometimes when you're playtesting, so that they know when they're playing, they have an idea of what they should be looking for as well. Because sometimes they could play a whole game and just not even, and then you ask for feedback and they're just like, I wasn't paying attention to that. Or, so if you say like, hey, I'm really focused on the core gameplay of this specific thing, could you, kind of look that over as we're playing, or think about that while we're playing.
Right.
And then it's also okay to ask people like hold feedback until the end if you don't mind. So that way it doesn't interrupt the flow of play and the time length. Because you should also be like recording how long it takes to play the game. And usually they're cool with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, setting expectations is huge. You can even, depending on with strangers or people ask for specific kinds of feedback, ask them to look for specific things, ask them to do specific things sometimes. Say, hey, we're gonna do this. Usually you can do boats or cars. Can I just do cars? Let's see what happens. I'm gonna do just boats. Let's see if that breaks things. It'd be fun, right? You have to lead that experience. To a degree, you're responsible like an MC for it being fun and running the experience, but you have to make sure it isn't miserable for them to help you. But if you give them that trust that, hey, I'm looking for something, it might fall apart. If it falls apart, we're done. We'll just walk away. We'll play one more round and we'll see how it is. And if we all bail, that's fine. If no one's having fun, if it's not working, cool, that's cool by you. Set those expectations, absolutely. But you can ask. They're there to help you, right? You don't get adversarial people coming in to be mean. Mean people don't do that, right? That doesn't make any sense. So just ask for what you want. Be as upfront as you can about that.
Awesome. Other questions? Yes.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, I guess some board games get logically quite complex, so I'm wondering if there's like, maybe I'm totally overthinking this, but I'm wondering if there's like sort of almost like mathematical or computation models to sort of like predict different cards for a game, and like use the visualization to come up with a rule that potentially works.
There's a lot of different ways to go down that road. So it kind of goes back to the classic theme versus mechanics conversation. I don't think so personally the concept of themes versus mechanics I think is kind of a non-starter for me. The reality is you're going to use a little bit of everything. When it comes to complex equations, I absolutely know designers who use math to make games, and that is a great way to make games. Not everyone does that, and that's also okay. I think the reality there is if the question is basically, what should I be doing for my game, you should do what feels right for you, and what is your most effective way for navigating how to solve the game. I've learned many times when because I've done equations in games. I think my last published game, Bittersweet, I started with an equation, and I quickly found that there were certain things that weren't working right because at the end of the day, players also have bias and feelings, and what they think is good isn't always what actually is good, right? So sometimes it's not about is this strong, but is it perceived as strong, or is it perceived as broken? Because even if it's the greatest mechanic in the world, it works wonderfully and it works perfectly mathematically, if every player thinks that it's broken, and you have to change that. And so equations are a great way, and kind of breaking things down on an Excel sheet or a Google sheet is a great way to kind of start understanding those core elements of your game. But I would say don't make it the law of the land for your game experience. Don't be afraid to diverge from that, because that's how you're going to start carving out a game that really fulfills a lot of the experiences you're looking for.
Board games are all about feeling, I think.
Vibes, people.
Yeah. I'll give one of my best learning experiences kind of to that. I have a game I'm working on, and a player has 10 different cards they can choose for every turn. They got 10 choices, right? And playtest is the playtest that people came to me and they said, I don't get this. These two cards are useless. They're completely underpowered. I'd never use them. I'd always use these two. What I noticed after a while is every player pointed to two different cards each time. What was happening was they had too many choices. And so the feedback, remember, there's a legitimate feeling there were too many choices. Those were overpowered or underpowered because they were only paying attention to one strategy. And so I took those 10 options and I broke them into 4 sets of 4 or 5 options in kind of different groups and gave them to them, and they said, oh, now I have a complete suite, all the 5 things I'd ever want to do. You've got fewer choices, but they felt like they had all the right choices at any time. And so that was, for me, a big wake up to why they keep saying this. They're wrong. This card is perfect. What's wrong with it? It wasn't perfect, but I was giving it to them the wrong way. So I was making a mistake. There was a problem. I could do better to that. So I had, again, mathematically perfect cards. Didn't work. That's not what players wanted. But if you're looking, especially if you're looking at systems like stock markets, things like that, absolutely, that should be a part of it, and it very commonly is a lot of games. Oh yeah.
The mind games can be the most important games.
Because that will often guide you, because it's very applicable not just with website design.
Absolutely.
Like, there's simple things that you learn from
Oh yeah, GUI design for the way the boards are laid out.
Yep.
My space, your space, far space, near space. A lot of good research there. Yeah, absolutely.
Bouncing off that, if you ever have a chance to take a technical writing class, it's worth it. We had a question over here. We had a hand raised earlier.
Yes.
Yes. Or, no, you right
Yes,
there.
got the stripes, yeah.
In the stripes, yes.
Hi, this is for me growing up with all sorts of card games, and even some right now. When something is too fun, like, when do you step in? Like, the biggest thing that I kind of think of is like with Yu-Gi-Oh! Magic, with like the banners and like limiting certain cards. Like, they make a really broken card, so they have to say, okay, you can't use that card anymore. Like, that kind of comes into nothing too with like stuff like custom, where you kind of just have to like, it's just in the game, it's just something's become too powerful, too popular, so they're like, yeah, there's other cards have a chance. What do you think? What do you think? When is too much fun bad? I think it's the way to put that.
Okay, so I think, at least what I think I'm hearing is if there's lots of things you can do in a game and people keep doing the same things, it's fun, they're ignoring everything else, right? And the related problem is people are only doing the boring thing because that's what wins, and those are both problems. A really good piece of feedback that Matt said is, what did you enjoy? What did you like most? Sometimes the answer there, if there's 3 or 4 different pieces and everyone's doing the one thing, well, that's your game. What's the rest of that junk for? Throw it away. You feel bad, it hurts because you made it, and it's great, it's perfect, I know. Maybe you can use it later, but maybe that's your game. There's 2 or 3 aspects they like, focus on those. Emphasize those anyway. Maybe the other stuff stays, but it gets smaller and less important. The opposite problem is that the boring thing is what people keep doing because it wins the game. That will depend on what's going on. You have to rebalance it, make that part more interesting, find out why everything else is more interesting, or reverse it. Just, well, the boring thing, make that less likely to win you the game, right? De-emphasize that.
I'll say 2 things. Balancing sort of that stuff out a little bit is important. Kind of gutting things out is important. But I'll also just add that balance is overrated. You do not have to have a perfectly balanced game. You should never strive for a perfectly balanced game because the reality is it's not happening. And I really want to stress that. So like if the concern is something's too much fun, like if players are just really focused on this one thing, start thinking about, okay, do I need it? Like you said, do I need this other stuff? If not, get rid of it. Don't be afraid to throw stuff away. Don't kill your darlings in that kind of situation. Joseph, anything to add to that?
No.
Great. I think we can take one more question, and then, yes, go ahead.
So like I myself, I'm like in the music industry.
Mhm.
And,
Awesome.
I just want to see in terms of like usually before like going to like for example a label or so forth, I want to have all my ducks in a row. If I'm registered, my work is registered, is it copyrighted? Not only to make sure I have my ducks in a row for them, but also for me. So like, in terms of referencing to a publisher, how do you go about doing that?
Any of you want to tackle that?
So in my other life, I work in intellectual property. For board games in particular, the value, really, the thing that would be stolen, plagiarized, is the finished product. It's the art, the rules, everything together as a package, something that can be sold, right? Your idea, you walk up and say, hey, I've got an idea for a game. I want an NDR, I'm not going to tell you about it. No, publishers are going to laugh at you, okay? Your idea in your head, oh, it's got cards, it's about the stock, boom, don't steal it. Too late, okay? From a practical legal standpoint, you really can't protect very much in board games. There's actually a Supreme Court decision 7 years ago over Bang.
Yes.
So a very famous game, Bang, from Italy, was plagiarized by a Chinese company. They changed all the words, but kept the game mechanics the same. And the Supreme Court said, sorry, there's nothing that protects the rules of the game. Written material, your character descriptions, if you have characters, your world building, all that kind of stuff, that can be protected by copyright. If you have logos, font designs, illustrations and things that go with your game, that's trademark. And patents stays as far away from board games as possible, thank God, because again, if someone patented drawing cards, what are we going to do, right? We're constantly stealing from each other. So legally speaking, don't worry about it. It sounds trite, but that's really the answer. No one's going to steal your one-line pitch. It just doesn't happen. That being said, it is a good idea for you to have any copyright material, again, have records of that. That's going to protect you. And just be aware that publishers do have intellectual property because we have the artwork we bought, we have the subject matter and stuff, and so that usually is the reason why we have non-disclosure agreements, or we say things like when you go to pitch something, we say things like, for legal purposes, we have to distance ourselves so that we don't think you're stealing your ideas. We're not going to steal your ideas. We're the ones that try to protect ourselves. So if you ever come across NDAs or things like that, it's us protecting ourselves, not anything we're doing to you. Ed, or?
I was just going to add real quick that just on an emotional level, the reality is like, because a lot of designers, when they enter the board game world, the most common thing I hear is, I don't want someone to steal my stuff. And that ends up becoming a situation where you're not sharing anything, which means you're not getting feedback, which means you're not play testing, which means you're not doing anything. The reality is, it's just the nature of the product we're making. The more interaction you have with your product, the better it's going to be, which means it has to be everywhere. You got to get it out there. You got to play it. You got to watch it messed up. And honestly, if somebody steals your idea, what's going to end up happening is they're going to end up changing it because they're going to go down a completely different road than you, and it's going to take them in a completely different direction. Very rarely do I have seen it happen. I've seen play-tested games that are not published get stolen, but because also the community is so small, and this is so extraordinarily rare, I really want to stress that, usually that person is spotted out, they're gone. Because if it's just so hard to do. The reality is you would have to have someone's assets and then change nothing, which that designer's probably already changed that game 6, 7, 8, 100 times by the time you've actually stolen it and tried to make it into a thing. So if you're stealing a game that's not done, or someone's trying to do that, their game's going to be not done, it's going to stink, and your game's going to be way better anyway. And if they're stealing a game that is done, that's a whole different ball game, right?
If I could also add, if you're actively, sharing your game ideas and sharing what you're doing, constantly on social media, on board game community groups and Discord and things like that, the board game community is an awesome watchdog, essentially, for your work, right? Like, you are documenting basically what you've been working on for the past year or so, and that they will have your side when they realize, oh, this game is just like, this just happened on Kickstarter a little while ago. I don't remember
was it that one?
It was a cat game or something like that. I can't remember the name of it.
Someone rethemed a game another designer had made, and people caught it. The designer canceled the Kickstarter. They're gone.
Right.
So you just have it because you have that digital record of everything. So that helps a lot. I think that is all the time we have for now. I just wanted to close things off personally by saying thank you so much, everyone, for attending this. Hope you got a lot out of it. Some just quick resources I recommend, breakmygame.com. Check it out. It's a great playtesting community. It does virtual playtesting events and in-person playtesting events, both in the local area and internationally. We do playtesting in the UK, so if you're ever there, stop by. That's pretty much. I appreciate it. Any other final thoughts from anyone?
No.
Great. All right. Thank you, everyone. You all have a great night.